Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today I want to show you how you can use MIDI controllers with your MA2 onPC setups. MIDI controllers are a really great way to extend your own onPC setup and customize it to the highest degree possible. This is something you can't even do with the real consoles because you can actually take arbitrary MIDI controllers, hook them all up to MA2 onPC, and pretty much assemble the hardware of your dreams. But there's a slight thing that you need to watch out for. Some MIDI controllers are better supported than others, and for the majority of controllers, you actually need to use a translator software. And that's what I want to show you today. So first of all, let's take a look at how you can directly use some MIDI controllers in MA2 onPC, and then other controllers that need translation, I will show you how you can set that up. Hooking up MIDI controllers to MA2 onPC is actually something that a couple of my friends are dealing with right now. So I thought this is a good time to make a video on that. So first, let's take a look at a MIDI controller that's supported right out of the box. And this is this lovely keyboard over here, for example. Now, I want to show you, first of all, how you can directly use a MIDI controller in MA2 onPC, because that's important to understand for later translating non-supported MIDI messages before they get into MA2 onPC. So let's take a look. I have this keyboard right here, and usually a keyboard like this will transmit note on and note off commands. MIDI, if you haven't really looked into it yet, is a protocol to transmit musical information in the age of modern computer-based music production. It's actually been around for quite some time. Unlike DMX, however, MIDI actually has different types of signals. So if I press these keys right here, it's actually transmitting a note on and note off command, because this is a different note than this, than this, than that. So each of these keys has a different note, and then you can actually map that in your software. And that's exactly what MA2 onPC will let us do, and we'll take a look at that in a second. Now, what you also see here is, for example, this volume control or a pitch modulator. This is something that MA2 onPC does not support. So what we're also going to take a look at is this controller over here, which actually only sends out control change messages exclusively. And that's something that you will find a lot, especially with faders like these. And these kind of messages need to be translated before you can use them in MA2 onPC. And I'll talk about that in a second, why exactly that is. But first, let's take a look at this puppy right here. I hooked it up. And now the first thing you want to do in your show is actually go to the command screen and then click on the yellow ball and go to options. And then here, I already did this, go to MIDI in device, click on this, and then find the name of your MIDI device as the MIDI in. And then next up, what we want to do is go to setup, and then remote inputs setup right here, go to MIDI remotes, and you can already see down here that something has been going on. So this window right here is perfect for actually troubleshooting your MIDI device connection. No matter what device you hooked up to MA2 onPC, if you kind of hit buttons and faders, you should now see something going on in this output. Now what's interesting is that if you see MIDI decoder new command note on right here, it also said something like receive MIDI remote, could not find remote 52. In that case, this is a supported MIDI on message. And MIDI on is actually the only MIDI message that's supported. Now take a look what happens when I use these other decoders here. It does recognize it, but it will not let you actually use it. So let's map this first key. I'm actually going to hit new, MIDI input, name, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Then note, we can actually find that out over here, note 50. Then what do we have here? Channel 1 actually. And then type. This is interesting. So here you have different possibilities. Mostly I just use executor, but you could also actually trigger a command. You can enter something right here. And what's also nice, but I don't really see use case for it, is hard key. So you could actually go ahead and map all of these hard keys to a MIDI controller. And here, I mean, after this, it's all the usual stuff. Page, current, yeah, it doesn't really matter. I mostly try to use current just to have more flexibility. In this case, I want to do executor 1. Perfect, and I'm going to choose button 1. So you can see here, you actually have different things that you can choose here. Let's double check that this mapping now works. If I hit this button right here, what we can see here is that it's firing remote 50, and that's perfect. So now let's go over here, and you can see here I have a really, really dead simple setup with 2 LED bars and then 2 sequences right here. So really, really straightforward. So now if I hit this button, it should actually trigger this left executor, which it does. So now in order to map this right executor, all we have to do is again go in here and then press the second key and just kind of observe the log window here and make out what exactly the data is here. So in this case, click on new, note 52 in this case. So 52, channel is still 1. Then executor current, in this case, the second executor, please. And then the rest, we can just leave it like that. Switch over to our other window, and now we can see that both of these are working. Perfect. Now what's also really interesting is that even though we have static buttons here, what you can also do is select fader. In this case, see, like observe what happens. It actually, whenever you hit this key, it actually gets set to the velocity of the key that you just pressed. So this might also be a really interesting thing to use. The only problem here is that you can see as soon as I let go of the key, it actually snaps back to 0%, even though I have an off time set here. So, you know, sometimes it's not as useful as you would think. And also what I found is that sort of hitting a predictable velocity with keys like that is actually pretty hard. So mostly I don't use that, but just FYI, the velocity of the note actually sets the fader value. And that's something we'll make use of later. All right, so that's the basic method of how you can actually map a MIDI controller that supports note on command. Now let's take a look at what happens when we have this nano control keyboard over here. Let me just swap it out. So this little keyboard is really great because what we have here is actually a ton of faders, 3 buttons on every row, and then even a few more encoders up here. So let's actually select that from the MIDI options in MA2. So now I'm clicking on, let's see, nano control. Remote inputs. So now when we actually use these, even when we press the buttons, we can see that there's a control change message being sent. So in this case, we can't make use of any of these because, as I said, and you can double check that in the manual or just try to map it, you won't succeed. So in this case, we don't have any way of directly mapping this because it's all control change messages. And it's kind of interesting because it actually shows you that something is going in. So that's really helpful in order to debug and find out whether your connection is working or not. But since MA2 is, or MA Lighting rather, is a hardware manufacturer, obviously they won't allow you to easily map anything because they actually want to sell their command wings to you, which is perfectly understandable. These kind of products is what finances all of this great software that we can use for free. So it makes sense that they wouldn't let you map whatever MIDI messages you want, but you know, we actually have a good way around that. and that is Bome's MIDI translator. So this is Bome. In case you haven't seen it before, Bome is a MIDI translator, which is used by a lot of people. This is sort of the industry standard, feels like it, for MIDI mappings. And what's cool about it is that this company also sells hardware boxes. So if you ever need to have a hardware-based approach to do this mapping that you're doing here, you can actually get a hardware box. So that's, I think, another reason why it's so popular. So let's first actually select our MIDI input here. Let's see, nano control. Now this is interesting because now it's giving you lib about not being able to open the device. And that's because MIDI devices can only ever be hooked up to one software. And so in this case, we have to deselect the MIDI in device in MA2 and then go back to Bome. All right, now it's open, perfect. So what we're now going to do is actually create a translator for this fader movement to send a note on message to MA2 onPC. And so we're going to create a new translator here. Name doesn't really matter. Capture MIDI. I'm just going to, again, observe the log window and see what's coming through here. And in this case, it lets us actually see what this message is made up of. So the first thing you want to do is take a look at, I didn't know this feature. So the first thing you want to do is actually click or find out what type this message is. Apparently you can just click on it. And now we have the channel. Let's see, channel 1, perfect. CC number 0, CC 0, yes. And then value kind of depends on where the fader is. So all the way up is 127, all the way down is 0. Now that's really great already. Let's actually take a look here, and outgoing, we want to send a MIDI message, note on, channel 0 note. We'll actually set this to 0 as well. And then velocity, I'm just going to send 127 here. All right. So now that we have this first translation going on, this window down here should actually show you that everything is all right. In this case, MIDI is going in, and this little thing down here actually shows you that it's translating something. Now, MIDI output, we still have to enable that. And in this case, what we can do here is actually select one of their virtual outputs. And now when we move the fader, we can also see that the MIDI out is activated. So like that, we can actually troubleshoot and make sure that something that we do on our controller is going into Bome, is being translated and sent out as another MIDI message. So now let's take a look at MA2 again. Go to options, and then MIDI in device should be something like Bome MIDI Translator 1. Let's take a look. Again, click on the project name up here to actually get to these MIDI settings. This is really interesting. MIDI Translator virtual out. Let's go back. MIDI Translator 1. So that should work. Again, we can double check this by going to remote input setup, MIDI remotes, and then going here. And we can see here that now we actually have a MIDI note command coming in. So again, what do we have here? Channel 1, note 0, and then the velocity, in this case 127. So note 0, perfect. Channel 1, the usual stuff. Executor, current page 1, 1, perfect. So now let's take a look. Let's go back here and then move this fader. And what's happening right now is that whenever we move the fader up from 0, then this already gets triggered. So that's already a success. We managed to translate this control change message over to a note on command in MA2. That's great. But what we actually want to do is translate this fader position to be a fader position inside of MA2. So let's take a look at how we can do that. So the incoming doesn't change. In this case, what we want to do though, first of all, with value, this is actually something that wasn't set up right. What you want to do is actually have this trigger at any value. Let's take a look at what that looks like. So if it triggers with any value, we can now see that whenever we move the fader, there's actually a trigger command being sent over. Still not with the correct velocity, so we can see over here that the velocity that's coming in is always 127. And that's something we want to change. And that's easily achievable by just going to value and then go set variable to value. And now we can choose one of these placeholders. Down here, it's a big list, in this case 00. And then we go down to outgoing, and instead of setting the velocity to static 127, we actually click on this drop down and click on this 00 container. So now let's go back and let's find out what's going on here. And now you can see that the velocity, this number right here, is moving or has the same value as the fader, and that's perfect. So now obviously we want to change this to not be the button 1 anymore, but the fader. So now let's go back here, and now we can see that we can actually move this fader using our control change message based fader, something that wasn't possible before. And now in order to move or to rather map everything else, what you do is you just add more translators. Again, in this case, the button, just press on it, just click on the one that you like, perfect, and then outgoing. Let's go to MIDI message, note on, perfect. Let's actually put this to note 2, velocity 127, perfect, channel still 1. So let's go back to this overview right here, create a new MIDI input. When we press the button, we can see now that we have something coming in on channel 1, note 1. So now let's go channel 1, note, executor 1, note 1, that's important. And now current page, executor 1, button 1. So that's exactly what we want to have. In this case, now we can actually move this fader and press this button to trigger the go release. So this is really nice because all of a sudden, just like on a real console, I can fade this around and still sort of trigger my stuff. You know, the other buttons are pretty straightforward. Again, press down here, select a MIDI message, go to the next note, or also what you can do is actually set one channel for all these faders, set another channel for all of these buttons, however you like to do it. Okay, and that's a quick intro to using MIDI controllers in MA2. Now, just to recap, first of all, only note on messages are supported in GrandMA2, but they can trigger commands and hard keys, but most importantly, executors. And for executors, what you get is actually the chance to trigger all 3 buttons plus the fader value with the velocity of the note on message. And with the help of Bome's MIDI Translator, you can actually take any sort of MIDI controller and map it to note on commands to actually make use of that in GrandMA2 onPC. Now, quick thing about Bome, it's actually not freeware. You can test it out though for an unlimited time. It will shut down after 20 minutes, but you can completely test it out, save your project. So after 20 minutes, you just open up the software again and then keep going. So it's perfect for evaluation. But what I did is actually obviously buy the license. It's only 60 to 70 bucks. So I think that's a very fair price. So please support this great software by buying it if you actually end up using it. And that's all for MIDI controllers. Mapping them is not, super straightforward, but at the end of the day, once you kind of get this connection, it's just a matter of time, investing a little bit of time for getting an amazing, really customized hardware setup. And I think that's worth it. So go ahead and test it all out. I won't be uploading the show file just because it's so simple. Just go ahead and follow along with the video. And if you have any questions, leave them down in the comments, contact me on socials or under my email address, which you will also find in the video description. And please do me a huge favor and subscribe to this channel. It means a lot to me. All right, talk to you next time. All All right, bit of a longer one today, but I hope a great primer on using MIDI controllers on MA2 on PC. New video for you in 2 weeks about mixing sequences and effects here on the MA2 Perform series. Videos for operators. Looking forward to bringing that one to you. So have a good one.